Okay, welcome back to part 7. Today we are going to talk about importing and exporting event data, object data, and scripts. We're also going to talk a little bit about object room IDs and some exceptions that are different than usual than any other stuff in the game. So to start off, exporting and importing. So let's say you wanted to take a template and make it your own. So right here I have Lost Heat Sword open. Everyone knows this quest. Alright. So I'm on Forest 1. If I want to import or export all the doors and object data, I want to hit export floor data. And save as type all chunk means that you export the objects, event data for the map event for like the calling waves, and the monsters. We only want object data here. And you'll have to save it. I'll just name this LHS object data. Object. Okay, so that's saved. You don't get a confirmation or anything. And now we're going to go to a blank Qedit. Go to Forest 1. You want to import. And we'll see right here my file. LHS object. You want object only, and hit open, and all of our stuff is here. It's going to be the exact same parameters for every single object that's set here. So if you like a template and you want to use it, this is the easiest way to recreate something without having to place everything manually. You can also do it for the script as well, and I'll just show this off really quick. So this is back to LHS, view script. Oh, actually, you can just do it right from here. Export. And it saves it as a PASM. So LHS script. We'll go back to our blank quest file here. Import. LHS script, open, and you have the entire script of LHS in here. This is a really good feature if you're making a quest series or just quests in general and you have a lot of functions that you want to retain that are similar to what you want to do in a future quest. It'll end up saving you a lot of time. Just to also show, you can actually write a script in the text file. So it's going to be an unknown file type when you probably have it on your computer. You can just set it to Notepad++. And basically it shows the whole script. Notepad++ makes it look really clean. So this is something you should definitely consider downloading if you're going to get into quest editing. With that being said, we're going to next talk about the object room ID. These things are necessary in 3 areas of the game. Every boss floor, forest, and the CCA areas. What these do is they tell the player what the previous room is and what the next room is. So just to show room IDs here, make this a little easier. So I have this is the starting area where you start in Lost Heat Sword, the lower right corner here. When you walk through this little energy gate here, if you look at this, it considers the next room, room 11. Actually, let's go back to LHS. It might be easier to look at in there. This room here is considered room 11. If you don't have this here, and you start placing monsters in room 11, you actually won't be able to target them. They'll be untargetable. So what the object room ID enables is targeting for monsters. It's important that you have this data correct. Otherwise, it's going to be a very hard time for programming. forest especially, and CCA as well. And if you look at the other ones that border this room, they also have the room ID here as 11. So I also have PW2 open here, Phantasmal World 2. And this one has its own set of object room IDs as well. I believe pheonixmog wants to talk about this one a bit.
And to go off of what Kayak had already mentioned with object room IDs, is they're used to differentiate the rooms, but not all of them seem so obvious. There is like an internal feature on the object room ID that helps to determine what room is actually tied to it. So if we see this one down here that's highlighted in yellow, the next room is labeled 8, previous room labeled 9. This is tied to a direction on the object ID itself, but an object ID is often never by itself. It's always right next to something else. And the object it's next to helps to determine which room is which direction. As we see in like Mountain especially, there are some spots in rooms that will contain the blue wire lines. These help show where boundaries are for rooms in Forest and CCA. They help show where targeting begins, targeting ends, and where boundaries are for this object. As we see here on the little machine that's in Mountain, the room boundaries on this black line crosses past the blue line that walks into the next room. And then the object ID for this one shows with the room IDs which directions they are. For bosses and for tower especially, there's no real boundaries that you have to worry about, but entering into a room, you of course will want to have an object room ID on the entry point. This updates your targeting to the proper area so that you don't have targeting issues. The two different issues that can occur is either no targeting pops up, or you have a target that doesn't like to stick. And a target that doesn't stick is generally because the object room ID is not tied to another object in the immediate area. In most boss rooms and tower locations, there's usually an object, such as a door or a player set, that would be right next to it. And this pretty much allows the object room ID to work 99% of the time. So even here, this object room ID is not quite on top of this player set. It is much more likely to not cause problems if they're layered on top of each other. And if you had seen in LHS, object room IDs are almost always laying right next to doors. This will help solve a lot of problems when you're trying to set room boundaries with these things. And from here, I'm going to have Kayak talk about the forest doors, which are unique in themselves.
Okay, so to aid in my explanation of these doors, I have a picture here. So if you were to look at this, the first, so forest doors are usually 4 numbers in decimal. So the first 2 are the color of the door. The last 2 are the lock of the door. So keeping that in mind, the last 2 being the lock, that's not the... So this one's set to -1, so it's always open. This one, 2821. So if we were to take out our calculator and convert this to hex, so this is skin number B. So going over this, I think it loops on itself. So I believe this would be a white door. Um, these are the only 10 options you have for the colors. But 05 would be the lock. So if we were to look at our view map data, wave 1113 is the 6 toll laws in the first room. And you'll see here that there's an unlock 5 and an unlock 6. If we were to look at this door, 518, we would see that it's lock 6. So that's where that's how forest doors are done. This is the only area in the game where the doors behave like this. Otherwise, the doors behave as you'd expect. So there's just a bit of a learning curve when it comes to programming forest in general, just because of the object room IDs and the way the forest doors work. Next, pheonixmog next, we'll talk about wolves and how they operate.
And wolves are one of the unique types of enemies where there's some labels that help determine their functions. If we see like one of these wolves in Forest 2, it has a group ID of 0, a leader flag of 0. To help show this, I'm going to right-click on the map, set wave number 3, so we only see the wolves for this wave. Now if we find the barbarous wolf, and we check its data, we will see it has a leader flag of 1 and a group ID of 0. This means that leader flag is the same as like Bumas, Dominions, Sharks, subtypes. This shows that it's just a different type of wolf. The group ID is what determines whether or not the savage wolves and other barbarous wolves with the same group ID, after it dies, becomes affected by their Gelin and Zaller. This functions the same way with Gibbons and CCA. The only difference is that they don't have a group leader flag. Once the Zol Gibbon dies, all Gibbons will SD themselves.
So Dark Gunners behave a bit differently. You can only place them in Ruins 2 and Ruins 3. So if we go to add a Dark Gunner, set it to wave 1 for example, it doesn't really matter. If you were to go test the quest and try to see this Dark Gunner, you would never see it. This is because the Dark Gunner needs a second enemy for it to activate. And this second enemy needs to be label or skin number 163. Now, this monster that's labeled 163 will never be visible. It kind of just acts as a activation to spawn all the Dark Gunners of this wave. So let's just say I wanted to copy this. So let's say I place these 5 gunners. So there's 6 gunners here, but this one that is labeled 163 will not show up. So one of these 5 will randomly become a Darth Gunner. I don't believe you can actually set which one it is, but it's just random every time. So just keep in mind that you will need a Dark Gunner set to skin 163 to activate it. And you can actually go over this as well in the Qedit wiki. It has a page on how Dark Gunners work. So if you're ever confused, just refer to that as well. Next, we are going to talk a little bit about Epsilons.
Epsilons are probably one of the most unique enemies in the game. There is a lot of versatility with what you can make out of them, but there are quite a lot of caveats for it. For example, if you try to place an Epsilon, it'll show up as a Cynozoa in the monster list. It shares the same skin ID as a Zoa in Seabed, but the labels each individually function for an Epsilon in Tower. Now, the labels that are defined for Zoa, but because they share the same labels, there's just going to be some information crossover here. The first label for an epsilon is how fast it moves. If you wanted to make a warping epsilon, like in A New Hope, Military Strikes Back, those have a 100 in this label here. This is just really how fast they move, and after a certain speed, epsilons just stop moving. They just start to teleport. If you wanted a epsilon like in Respective Tomorrow, where it takes twice as long, then you would set the second, third, fifth, and sixth label as shown. This is just the vanilla ones from Sega. You're free to tweak these and experiment as you wish, but one of those flags essentially doubles the duration. This is just like one aspect of things that you can change on Epsilon. There's quite a few other ones that we are not going to go over at this time. And from here, we're just going to prep the quest for testing.
So, if you last remember where we left off, this door up here had some issues staying open. So, there is an additional flag on this door that we forgot to set. And we want to stay active at -1. This just basically tells the switches that when you press on both of them, the door will stay open. It won't close after you push both switches. And also the traps down here.
These traps from before, I had shown with the elemental trap values from Lost Ice Spinner that when we actually went in and tested it, exploded immediately. And this is because I hit cancel in the top right of the window, which doesn't save any of the label information. If I wanted to save the label information, I would have to hit OK. So these are the labels that are used for a generic elemental damage trap from Sega. If we hit OK and we move this trap to the other side of the bridge, it'll retain its data. The status trap we were going to showcase with a trap link of 0 so that it floats over your head. And this properly show that the trap goes off and works, we're going to make this a slow trap. A slow trap has a subtype of 17, and we will set this one at the beginning of the bridge. And the last thing that we're going to confirm is that we can properly finish the quest. To do so, I'm just going to place a couple objects that are on Pioneer 2. You are free to import the map data for this as well.
Yeah, so this principal warp will just take us back to the regular Pioneer 2 area. And there's no specific monster data for the Guild Lady. Sega kind of just used Episode 2 Nurse for a bunch of different ones.
An important thing to mention too is when you import map data that has NPCs, verify that the function is not something that's going to be called that doesn't exist, because that is a crash or very disastrous result. The last object that we're going to place so that the quest can complete is a menu activation. This event that pops up when you go talk to the Guild Lady.
0 is the arm shop. Menu ID 4 is the Guild Lady.
And with that, we pretty much have a way to complete the quest and show that it is working as intended.
Always remember to save your work. So now that we have our test live on the server, we can go and test it. Okay, our door's unlocked. Oh, that's not normal.
That's not normal.
Well, let's go see if we can clear our quest anyway.
Oh, right. There's no player set coming back.
So we got placed here because this is the 0, 0 coordinate on Pioneer 2. And now we should be able to get our prize. Okay, we got our money. We got our prize. We were to complete our quest. Got the 3,000 Meseta because I had 7,000 and change before.
Now, the other thing that we also forgot to place
is a player set, a returning player set.
The player set returning the flag that determines whether or not it's a starting area or returning to an area. When the return flag is set to 1, that determines whether it's starting in an area or coming from another area. So when this is 1, that means that's where we'll end up when we come back to Pioneer 2. And another thing that needs to be fixed is if zone clear to be after the registers that determine the area. We'll just move it down below the 2 registers, and this should work as intended. The 2 registers that determine the parameters for the register weren't set before the function is checked. Like before, it's just like an if switch pressed. If you try to define something that hasn't been if you try to work with something that hasn't been defined, then you're going to have some weird results. And from there, we're good to go again.
Okay, so we're going to reload our quest now. Hopefully with these fixes, everything will be as expected. Okay, so far so good. Our switches here. Okay, and just to go over our door again here. Stepping on this switch first will deactivate it, so we have to step on the left one first so it stays active. Then our door opens. Now we shoot this. Okay, and we are slowed. And our trap does 60 damage. Get our soul atomizer. Okay, and that's good. We have defeated all the enemies. We can now return to the guild counter. So, from the last part, let's not forget that we actually added a quest exit in the quest board here. So, as you can see, it's here. Do you want to teleport back to the lobby? We hit no, just to make sure it works. And I have my actions. And now let's hit yes, see what happens. Okay, and it works. This brings us to our conclusion for part 7. Thanks so much for watching. In part 8, we're going to go more into some more depth scripting, so stay tuned.